Begin tonight with an unfolding emergency in Japan after a powerful earthquake shook the south of the country. It left 100 people injured and dozens trapped, presumed dead. The 6.8 magnitude quake struck at 4:27 p.m. local time and was strong enough to be felt in neighbouring South Korea. The epicenter was on Japan's main south island of Kyushu. Officials say around 30 people are unreachable at a collapsed shopping mall, while several people are missing after a chimney caved in at a paper mill. Helen Smith has tonight's first report.
The aftermath looks almost otherworldly. What was once a shopping mall structure, scattered. Mangled metal that looks as if it's been picked up and launched. Indeed, the Aeon shopping centre is now a focal point in this disaster. Here, an explosion followed the quake, leaving huge parts of this building blown out or collapsed in, and people unaccounted for. Video from inside shows the early panic as people ran to escape. Dashcam footage caught the blast. It's unclear exactly what caused it. In a country no stranger to earthquakes, this was a big one. The highest level 7 on Japan's own seismic scale. Throughout Kumamoto, people screamed and ducked as they shook. Just listen to the lingering fear.
The initial shock was, I think, about 2 minutes or something, and it was quite big. I've never experienced that big earthquake, so I was not being able to stand still. So I was in holding rail or something. I feel like every 20 minutes, I feel like, the land is shaking.
An urban epicenter has heightened the impact. Damage to homes, roads and buildings. A train derailed from its tracks. Authorities have warned of aftershocks. Some 300,000 evacuated.
We're currently assessing the damage and number of casualties, but there have been reports on injuries as well as power cuts, damaged roads, bridges and buildings. I ask all to take measures to protect yourselves.
10 years ago, this city saw an earthquake that killed dozens. But this is still a provincial place with many old and traditional buildings. Experience doesn't lessen the shock. Japan may be better prepared than most for events like this, but no amount of preparation could fully withstand such force, and the full cost is still being counted. Helen Smith, Sky News in Beijing.
Now, a question for you. What happens when two violent wars collide? I'm talking, of course, about the conflicts in Ukraine and Iran. It's been on my mind because today, two leaders, Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, arrived at the White House for back-to-back meetings with Donald Trump, exposing the US president's lack of progress in ending the fighting. Unusually, we didn't hear from them today. TV cameras weren't allowed in, but all sides said the talks went well. That's papering over the growing and very real risk of a direct confrontation. Iran and Ukraine may be fighting different battles, but there are adversaries. This is the Caspian Sea. This weekend, for the first time, the Ukrainian military attacked an Iranian ship carrying military equipment between Iran and Russia. We'll look more closely at that relationship coming up. But first, let's go to our correspondent, James Matthews, who joins us live from Washington. James, a busy day at the Oval Office. Let's talk first about Benjamin Netanyahu. And unusually, we didn't see any cameras in the room.
Hi, Yalda. Yeah, unusually indeed. And, we don't know much about what went on inside. I suspect it was a closed meeting, because of the potential for disagreement breaking out in public. Positive and productive was how Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, described both get-togethers. Netanyahu, well, he called it a conversation of full partnership, mutual support, said it was one of the best conversations he's had with the President of the United States. I think, Yalda, for it to be a substantive conversation, it had to be about the substance that separates them, namely different ideas. about the road ahead in the Iran war. Netanyahu, well, he wants military escalation. Trump wants a quick resolution. He wants to stop feeling the pain of the political fallout, and that doesn't necessarily lie in further military action. There is no suggestion that they're any further forward following today's events towards an endgame that would suit both. They don't have the friendship, this pair, or the trust that they once did, and that will trouble Netanyahu particularly. He's got elections later this year in Israel and desperately wants Trump's endorsement. There is a value in that for him in Israel.
Yeah, and before this war was started by Donald Trump and, based on the counsel of Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump had promised famously to end another war, the Ukraine war. And of course, Volodymyr Zelensky was also at the Oval Office today.
That's right, yeah. I mean, he is the peacemaker president who doesn't have a great hit rate. Zelensky, he spoke about the meeting. He was on X. He said they had discussed licenses for Patriot interceptor production. Ukraine needs that, wants that for defense against Russian attack. He said that it's important that the diplomatic process is reinvigorated. Interestingly, in the past couple of hours, it's reported that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, negotiators in chief for Donald Trump, they're said to be in talks to visit Kyiv. That would be the first time that pair had done so in Trump's second term, been to Kyiv. So I think Zelensky, he'll be happy with his day's work. It's a long way from the calamitous meeting, certainly, that he had in the Oval Office 18 months ago. There continues to be a warming in the relationship between Trump and Zelensky, even though Trump's dealings with Putin, that hangs over the Zelensky-Trump dynamic. And for Ukraine, that continues to be a concern. Trump's warm relationship through time with Vladimir Putin.
James, thank you so much for that update. Now, let's focus on the overlap of the two conflicts. The US intelligence analysts have reportedly been investigating if Russia assisted Iran with targeting information or drone technology. Donald Trump has cast doubt on how much Russia may have helped Iran to strike CIA facilities in the Gulf. At least 2 CIA sites were hit in March, one inside the US Embassy in Riyadh and another in eastern Iraq. That same month, Iranian drones targeted the US Embassy in Baghdad. They were intercepted by air defense systems, but the compound was still hit by shrapnel, which set off a large fire.
I'll ask Putin about it. We'll find out. Hasn't had much impact because we've knocked the hell out of it. What do you think? If that's the case, look, they gave Venezuela a lot of equipment. Venezuela had all Russian equipment. How did that work out? Not too good.
Well, Russia and Iran have made no secret of supporting each other in the past. In February, not long before the war began, Russia inked a $500 million deal to supply Iran with advanced shoulder-fired missiles. And after the 12-day Israel-Iran war last year, Russia agreed to construct 8 nuclear plants in Iran. Geographically, they can also avoid US sanctions trading across the Caspian Sea. Well, let's get now the thoughts of Anna Borshevskaya. She's a Russia expert and senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you so much, Anna, for joining us here on the program. I mean, the truth of the matter is, it wasn't going to be long before this kind of dynamic between Ukraine and Iran would sort of unfold, given we've seen Iran support Russia from the very beginning of the conflict with those Shahed drones. I mean, they essentially changed the whole nature of the Iran war. And then ultimately, by using these drones and the fact that both sides advanced their technology, changed the whole nature of modern warfare.
That's right. It's a pleasure to be on your show. The fact of the matter is, there's been some reporting that suggests there's more of a convergence between the Iran war and Ukraine war. But the fact of the matter is we're already there. And as you said, it started with Iran providing Shahed drones to Russia to kill Ukrainians, to kill Ukrainian civilians. We're now, fast forward several years later, with Russia allegedly providing Iran with targeting information about the location of US troops. the war in Ukraine is a global war, and there's no pretending otherwise.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, Iran and the United States and Israel are directly in conflict with each other. And as you've just, you know, mentioned, Ukraine is essentially, and Volodymyr Zelensky, in sort of quite a clever, cunning way, is trying to show Donald Trump that they have a common enemy in Iran by seeing that gap in the air defenses and drones that the Gulf states need, for example, to protect themselves against Iranian missiles. And also, you know, by targeting an Iranian ship and saying that they were trying to give supplies to the Russians, he's trying to essentially show that this is a much more of a global conflict than two isolated wars.
Right, and you know, the fact of the matter is, of course, as you suggest, Zelensky has incentive to draw links between Iran, the war that Ukraine is fighting with Russia, and the Iran war. But it also happens to be true. It happens to be accurate. Because of precisely what we've just discussed, Iranian and Russian support for each other, as well as for Iranian support for Russia and Ukraine, that's not imaginary, that's real. And the points that Zelensky is making, it's not simply PR. He is fighting for his country, and Ukraine is fighting a war of survival. Ukraine is fighting for its life. So the stakes really could not be higher.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt about that. And we've just spoken about, you know, Iran's involvement from the very beginning in terms of its relationship with Russia, a relationship that they have built over many, many decades in terms of the collaboration. But the point I'm trying to make is that President Zelensky has seen this opening and the gap that the Gulf states have, for example, with their interceptors, and sort of said, look, here's what we've learned, the lessons we've learned from our war with Russia. This is how I can provide you with support. And very openly now talking about Iran's engagement and involvement in a very direct way, which has made it feel much more global now that Iran is in direct conflict with the United States.
Absolutely, and again, this was in many ways a natural trajectory of where we were headed with these two conflicts, given how closely they are connected, given the close relationship between Russia and Iran. Zelensky, for his part, you know, when he reached out to the Gulf states, he seized a very important moment. And what it shows is what an incredible asset Ukraine is to the West. That's what Zelensky had demonstrated with this reach out to the Gulf states, because the fact of the matter is there really is no other country in the world that has the same technical expertise and knowledge and experience along with the technology to counter Russian drones. And, you know, we often talk about opportunity missed. Well, Zelensky did not miss this opportunity.
And how concerned are you that this could converge into a bigger sort of global conflict where it's not just confined to Europe, the West, you know, the United States assisting Ukraine with the war that Russia has launched, but also given there's this other front, the Iran war, and it's very similar players, you know, other than sort of Israel being directly involved in this conflict and now the Gulf states being dragged into the Iran war as well?
Well, it could potentially escalate. There's always that danger. And it goes back to exactly what we started discussing earlier. We're already there in this world where these wars are so closely interlinked. Russia, for its part, can also escalate. In many ways. In many ways, Russia already has waged what you might call a shadow war against Europe with cyber attacks, with Russian drones flying into NATO territory. So again, in many ways, this conflict is already there, and that danger that it could spiral further is also a possibility.
Anna Bolshevskaya, thank you very much for joining us here on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Danny Citronovich headed up the Iran branch in the Research and Analysis Division of Israeli Defense Intelligence. He's now a senior fellow at the Institute for National Security Studies. Thank you so much, Danny, for joining us here again on the programme. I just want to pick up a little bit more on what my previous guest was saying. I mean, these are not now isolated wars. It very much feels like, you know, the convergence of these two conflicts, and we very much are there, you know, even though the alarm bells are being rung as though, you know, it wasn't already happening.
Well, definitely you're right. I think that it's interesting to see the similarities between both conflicts. And I think that the recent Ukrainian attack on the Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea highlight again the connection between both conflicts in a way that we all know that the Iranians helped the Russians in their attacks over Ukraine, and now the Ukrainians attacking some sort of channel that being opened between the Russian and the Iranian in the Caspian Sea. So definitely there is a connection. Definitely there is a link. It's very interesting to see what will happen in the near future. The Iranians are threatening in retaliation, and I think that today we had even a phone call between the foreign ministers of both sides. Again, different statements coming from both of them, but I think that definitely one on a way that maybe we can find ourselves we'll see actually this conflict interlinked in if the Iranians will choose to retaliate against Ukraine. So definitely we have to pay closer look to that. Definitely you can see the similarities, and definitely the recent Ukrainian attack actually highlight for us that the connection between both conflicts, and it's not something that ended. I think that we are still waiting to see how the Iranians react, and then I think maybe we'll see more similarities than we thought, or than we think.
Yeah, let's focus now a little bit more on Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to Washington to meet with Donald Trump. I mean, this is the first time they're meeting since that full-scale invasion was launched back in February. Of course, the two men, Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he speaks to Donald Trump all of the time, but this is the first face-to-face meeting. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that it was very fruitful, it went very well, but there were clearly no cameras in the room. And, you know, we've seen a very frustrated Donald Trump, who was promised a very swift end to this conflict, and it's now dragging on and on for months. And, you know, there's no, at the moment, it doesn't feel like there's an end in sight.
Well, you're right. But first we have to say a big caveat, because we had this discussion in the past, and then we discovered that both leaders agreed to attack together in Iran. So we have to be very careful in what we are saying. But definitely now the feeling is different, meaning that Netanyahu is coming to the White House pretty isolated, very weak, also domestically in Israel. The polls show that he won't be prime minister. And in terms of Trump is negotiating with Iran, the same country that Netanyahu want to topple the regime. So again, I have to be very hesitant and saying that I don't know what happened there. And Netanyahu saying it was a perfect meeting. He would say that regardless, because he has to portray that he has close relations with Trump, also against what's happening in Israel and how he perceived by a majority of the population in Israel right now. But I think that we have to wait and see what will happen. One thing that is important to say, that the majority of the people surrounding President Trump, including the Vice President J.D. Vance, thinking that Netanyahu wants to push Trump back to extension of a war against Iran. And this is something that is unacceptable in many people thinking in Washington this is unacceptable, and that Netanyahu is trying to push Trump again to this war. Again, I don't know what will happen in the end and whether Trump will decide to extend the war, yes or no. But I know that from Netanyahu's ability to influence Trump, definitely it was rooted in recent months, given the failure in the Iranian war.
Yeah, Danny, I just want to pick up on the point that you have made, because, you know, in the last year, or more now, since Donald Trump returned back to power, we've analysed almost every one of the meetings between Trump and Netanyahu. And, we've seen Donald Trump swear about Netanyahu and leaked reports. That hasn't changed the nature of what Netanyahu has wanted Donald Trump to do, whether it was the 12-day war, whether it was launching this particular attack in February into a full-scale offensive. So it's easy to read into the optics of the relationship, but actually at the end of the day, Benjamin Netanyahu has managed to get what he has wanted from Donald Trump.
You're absolutely right. This is why we have to be very cautious in what we are saying. Again, no doubt that this is a different meeting. There were no cameras. The leaders didn't meet just the two of them after the big meeting. It's a very unique decision not to meet only the two of them. And I think that even more than that, I think that in terms of the statement, in terms of everything that's happened before the meeting, President Trump said, I don't need Netanyahu. I know what's happening in Pickaxe Mountain. So all the sense is that there is some sort of pushback against Netanyahu involvement in the Iranian war. Having said that, again, you have to wait and see what Trump will decide because he's still in some sort of strategic crossroad. You need to decide whether we're turning back to negotiation, to the MOU with the Iranians, or extending the war. Now, if you extend the war, expand it, definitely people will turn back to meeting Netanyahu and say, okay, Netanyahu presented to him some information that pushed him again to return back to war against Iran. So we don't know, but definitely the surroundings is very negative regarding Netanyahu. And I have to say one thing about that as well. In Washington, in general, in the Congress, in the polls, Israel is perceived very negative, especially after this war, perceived as a country that pushed President Trump to a very negative war towards Iran, a war that actually failed because the regime, there was a change within the regime, but the regime didn't topple as was promised, or as Netanyahu promised President Trump, sorry. So I think in that regard, definitely we have a negative side, negative trend in Washington against Israel. Having said that, Trump still can decide to extend the war, and then we have to wait and see, or return back to this meeting. Maybe it was very fruitful, as Netanyahu claimed.
Yeah, Danny, in terms of domestic politics in Israel, I mean, obviously this is an election year, October 27. We are going to see Israel go back to the polls. And the current polling shows that, if there was an election tomorrow, Benjamin Netanyahu, according to those polls, would probably not win, but he does have an ability to reinvent himself, and be able to sort of make a comeback just when you think that Benjamin Netanyahu has sort of weakened his position. He also needs to show that he has a very strong and solid relationship with Donald Trump, because that helps things for him back home.
You're absolutely right. When you check and see who are the leaders Netanyahu is in contact with, eventually he has only President Trump. And I think President Trump knows that, and he used it as a leverage against Netanyahu. Netanyahu needs to show that he has strong relations with Trump. This is why, regardless of what happened in the meeting, he said that it was an amazing meeting, because he has to show that to the Israeli people. Like you said, he's in a very complex situation according to the polls. Even if we have, or if we had the elections tomorrow, definitely he wouldn't be the Prime Minister of Israel. So he has to hang on to his relations with Trump. And even more than that, he needs to return back to war against Iran. He cannot withdraw from Syria and Lebanon because he has to show his security posture is strong and is able to counter even President Trump's wishes. So I think in that regard, he's hoping returning back to the war against Iran because according to recent polls in Israel, majority of people in Israel know that it was a failed war. So we want to return back to that because he's like, Mr. Iran, and I want to show that I'm able to topple this regime. And he needs Trump's approval for that. So definitely, you're absolutely right. Netanyahu is really depending on President Trump and his support before the election, but also that he will allow Israel to do the right thing in terms of what Netanyahu thinks the right thing, meaning returning back to war against Iran, not withdrawing from Lebanon and Syria, not sending the F-35 to Turkey, and so forth and so forth. And that maybe Netanyahu thinks because we have a close election, maybe that will help him to gather more mandates that will help him to win the next elections.
And you just, talked there about Netanyahu. He also likes to sell himself as Mr. Security. Again, if we look at domestic situation in Israel, things have flared up last weekend. I mean, things have been flaring up for the last couple of years in the West Bank. Could you talk to that a little bit and how that's being perceived in Israel? I unfortunately only have a couple of minutes, but I'm curious to know, how the Israeli public perceive that situation, which is spiraling out of control at the moment.
Definitely, it's close to getting out of control, and this is very worrying for everybody. I think also from the Israeli public, but I think even more than that, I think the situation in West Bank highlights one important thing also towards our election, that even if the regime in Iran will be toppled tomorrow, it won't solve our security problems that we have, especially in Gaza and Palestine. The Palestinian issue, it's Israeli decision to make. It's not U.S. decision to make. We have to, at the end of the day, agreeing what we want to do with the Palestinian issue. And I think as Israeli, we are always returning back to the Palestinian quagmire without understanding what we want to do, whether two-state solution, one-state solution, annexing. And I think this is something that the next government will have to take decision. And I'm hoping there's not going to be another intifada until the next election, because what's happening now between the violence of the settlers and the response coming from the Palestinians is something that is really bringing us to, it's like a volcano, almost erupting. So the bottom line of things that I'm hoping that at the end of the day, after the election, the next government will take care of that, understanding that Israel is eroding its legitimacy in the international community if we are not going to try to fix the Palestinian problem. And we cannot continue as it is right now, because what's happening in the West Bank really threatening our security, the stability of the region, and of course preventing us from reaching normalization with Saudi Arabia.
Danny Citronovich, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Still to come on the programme, a true American original and a war hawk. How the late US Senator Lindsey Graham is being remembered at his funeral in Washington.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city, where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Donald Trump has described Lindsey Graham as a man who never saw a war he didn't like. At the late US Senator's funeral in Washington, the US President joined leaders from home and abroad paying tribute after Graham's sudden death from suspected heart disease earlier this month. Have a listen.
Well, he was always quick to laugh, and no one ever doubted the gravity of his mission. Above all, Lindsey Graham believed in a strong America. He wanted a strong America. He had unwavering faith in the righteousness of American power and prayer. And he was extremely hawkish. I will tell you, he never saw a war that he didn't like. Only his true friends would understand that, but he wanted it for the good of our country. He felt in his bones that our destiny is to win, and that his job was to do everything he could to ensure our enemies would lose. It was this conviction that led him to serve 33 years in uniform in the Air Force and Air Force Reserves and Air National Guard, even while he was in office. And it was this conviction that took him as a senator to almost every country on earth, confronting America's adversaries and standing up for America's friends. He had tremendous friendships all over the world. It's a testament to his towering impact that among those mourning him here today are leaders, presidents, prime ministers from all over the globe. They're sitting right here before you. Lindsey met countless world leaders, yet wherever he went, he was always the same Lindsey Graham.
That was Donald Trump on Lindsey Graham. This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we're in France and Spain, where yet another heat wave threatens to fan massive wildfires. What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now? It's a mixed picture tonight with the wildfires in France and Spain that have together forced evacuation orders for 300,000 people. We'll tell you about some of the progress being made in Spain shortly, but in France, crews have only a fragile hold on the vast wildfire burning west of Bordeaux. And they've ordered new evacuations as searing heat returns. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
From the air, the fire leaps across the countryside in glowing ribbons. In this area, the blaze is advancing with the certainty of the tides. These are no longer isolated incidents, and resources across the region are being stretched to the limit.
We've got a major flare-up behind us and two smaller ones out front, which require a massive deployment of aerial and ground resources in a place that's difficult to access.
The scale of this disaster is difficult to absorb. Fires are burning across areas measured in tens of thousands of hectares. This conflagration is now 4 times the size of Paris.
There is a real sense of unease now across this region. The weather is changing again. It's extraordinarily hot. And you can feel the wind as well. It's whipping through this area now. You can see how much destruction there is in this part of the forest. They've managed to get the flames under control, but look over here. You can see as the wind's picking up again, it's starting.
And the speed with which the flames move is startling. Places that were once green turned to charcoal and ash in the space of a few hours. These images, captured by a firefighter, show the ferocity of the flames as they're fanned by the windy conditions. And what stands out is the relentlessness of this disaster. As one area is brought under control, another is demanding attention elsewhere. Much of the Gironde region is now deserted. Communities that were preparing for another hot summer have faced repeated evacuations and an uncertain return.
The
fire came in from everywhere and surrounded the village. Unfortunately, it burned through the whole forest and burned around 15% of the houses, roughly 180 homes.
In the coastal town of Lacanau, holidaymakers and residents forced to leave, with the fires quickly creeping ever closer. Fire crews from across the continent are now working together, but with wildfire seasons becoming longer and more destructive, this is now a test of Europe's ability to respond to a changing climate. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Southwest France.
Let's go to Spain now, where crews have made progress against some of the wildfires. Several are still burning out of control, and another summer heatwave is bearing down. These pictures were taken by infrared cameras on a drone, giving an indication of the ferocious heat coming from wildfires in the hills surrounding Avila, a city just northwest of Madrid. Sky's Connor Gillies is there and sent us this report.
When they say evacuate, this is why. A fire on the move. Time-lapse footage covering a matter of minutes, exposing the pace of this so-called monster blaze. Spain is a country under pressure. The power of a wildfire scorching 5 times the size of Barcelona. The car park of this funeral home here in Spain is at the centre of this nation's response to this crisis. Look, we can see teams frantically working, and they have been now for days, mapping out the situation. Day and night, this is where the Spanish are taking the fight to the fire. An extraordinary setting for an extraordinary emergency. Your colleagues in the fire service have told us that they may have extinguished an area and then they're having to redeploy because the fire comes back.
Of course.
Is that the constant challenge you have?
Yes, it's the constant challenge, and there is another risk because there are other areas inside the forest that have been not burned completely, so they have what we call a return potential.
Keeping crews fed is part of this mission. They rotate through here before heading back out, where every break is brief and every meal fuels another shift on the mountain.
We have been here for 5 days, boots on the ground, with a small team of about 10 people. We have delivered about and distributed about 33,000 meals together, including sandwiches and hot meals. And then per day, at this point, at this rate, we're doing about 6,500 meals per day.
Firefighters hope for progress, but for every mile gained, this next phase is critical, as another near 40-degree heat wave brings the potential of reigniting this land that took days and huge manpower to bring under control. Conor Gillis, Sky News, in Avia, Spain.
Lyndon Pronto had a career fighting wildfires. He joins me now. Thank you very much, Mr. Pronto, for joining us here on the programme. You know, when we talk about these wildfires, and we've been discussing them for the last few days, and the fact that the temperatures continue to increase, and the fact that, you know, this is a changing nature of how things are going to be in the years to come, it does feel like there were warnings about this for many years. I mean, certainly for as long as I can recall, I've spoken to climate change experts almost on an annual basis, where they have said that the planet is getting warmer and we're going to see more of the kind of thing that we're currently seeing.
Absolutely. And that's one of the frustrating aspects of seeing disasters unfold like this, because they really should not be catching anyone off surprise, because you know, so many in the community have been sounding the warning calls, and the challenge is getting the funding and the investments in the right places and in time to actually make a difference at landscape level.
Yeah, and like you say, it does feel at the moment like it's very much reactive. You were very much involved in, you know, wildfires in California. Just talk us through some of the lessons that can be learnt from, you know, the kind of destruction that we've seen these sorts of fires cause in places like California, and, you know, what we can expect in the weeks to come, and how the French, you know, and the Spanish communities should prepare for it.
I think one of the principal lessons to learn from places like North America is the necessity for this prevention work, the necessity to go in and actually reintroduce fire into these landscapes which are fire prone. And particularly in Europe, these landscapes are becoming increasingly fire prone. And the mistake that the US made was an overly aggressive approach to firefighting. So to put every fire out as quickly as possible. And I guess now, unfortunately, one has to say that this is a line of thinking that, for instance, France has also followed this very aggressive, initial attack, and that's not a bad thing per se, but it needs to be balanced on the other end, because if you have a very fire-prone environment with a huge buildup of burnable vegetation, and then these climate conditions coming to bear on that as well, there needs to be a similar investment in reducing this and focusing on making sure that that balance is re-achieved in making sure that these fires don't become so extreme like they're becoming. And that is a challenge that is needs to be addressed as an all-of-society approach. It's not a firefighter's challenge to address. It needs to be all sorts of stakeholders: forestry, agriculture, nature protection, individuals, communities. They need to come together to make sure that their spaces are more resilient to fire.
Yeah, and understanding their spaces. I grew up in Australia, and every year ahead of the fire season, there would be a series of backburning that would take place, where communities understood the risks that their the landscape had, and therefore they would start the backburning quite early on, months before the fire season. Is that the kind of thing you're talking about, rather than just putting out the fires with say water, sort of preparing a little bit ahead so that they can safeguard where they're at?
Yes, that's exactly an international good practice that we often cite, is this early season burning. It's one of many approaches you can use, but it's certainly at scale one of the most effective approaches to be able to, when the conditions are favorable for us as humans, to control the intensity, the speed, the location, the burn severity. These are all things that when we do prescribe burning, we can control these parameters. And that means also pulling the plug if the parameter, if the conditions change, and to say, okay, we're going to stop doing this now because now, it can get dangerous. So this, and the other methods are, these landscapes used to be intensively managed with livestock, farmed, different types of forestry, smaller forestry scale, and not this monoculture. And we need to get back to that investment in the landscape.
And in terms of, going forward, because we heard from the French president yesterday, who said we shouldn't be just preparing for the coming days and weeks. This is something that we need to think about over the coming months, and that is how the communities need to prepare for themselves for. What advice would you be giving, not just the firefighters, but the communities? Many of them have been evacuated from their homes. What should they be expecting, and what should they, more importantly, be doing?
So places like California and Australia, they had to learn the hard way that the responders aren't able to save everything. They'll do their best, but that the threshold of control has gone beyond what no amount of airplanes or fire engines or firefighters can actually control. And I think, and I frankly hope that this is now a wake-up call for certain places in Europe that haven't gotten to that point yet, to realize that we are putting an impossible burden on responders to expect them to be able to deal with fire of this intensity and this speed. And the only way to give them something that they can defend, give them, an opportunity to save us and help us and prevent, severe damages like this, is if we take individual responsibility within our communities, and we, take care of our houses, what we build them out of, what we plant in our gardens. And that, can be something that you can do without funding, but there's certainly a huge return on investment if governments and local governments step in and provide incentives, identify the champions, because in all of these communities, there are people that want to do that. They're motivated, they're passionate, they have the resources, but it's often bureaucracy and rules and a lack of, institutional support that prevents them from working together across different disciplines and having just a little bit of funding to get that, that job done, to be able to change the outcome.
Linda Pronto, grateful for your time. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, we'll tell you why the US walked out on France at the United Nations.
This is how you travel when the mafia wants to kill you.
He's almost given up his own freedom, but that's the price he's willing to pay.
Here, they don't just arrest and Ndrangheta mafia members, they also live among them.
Time after time, I've seen the devastating impact of extreme weather and climate change.
We don't have much snow at the moment.
They've had a warm spring and exceptionally hot summer, and that means they're expecting to lose more than 3 times the amount of ice than they usually do.
Flames are still forcing people from their homes and leaving many questioning their futures.
Here was my life. We have nothing. I can't say anything, it's so sad.
This disaster is testing the resolve of everyone on this island.
The only way out now is by boat.
Everything you see is devastated, and the misery being felt by people living here is repeated in towns and villages across Central Europe. Sky News, get the full story first.
Turkey is burying its dead. The loss is profound.
Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out.
The violence has penetrated the heart of the city rather than being contained to the estates around the edge, and that speaks to the level of anger being felt here. In Sweden, police have seized a lethal stash. This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
This is an example of an advert, really. Anyone of any age could say, I'll do that for £1 million, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dashed to the water.
Wait, what country are you from? The UK. Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
Let me start with breaking news.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Strained relations between the US and France have played out in extraordinary scenes at the UN Security Council. The Americans took serious exception to this social media post by France's UN mission in Geneva, calling out the US for its opposition to giving UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk another 4-year term. They wrote, "The US used to be a beacon of human rights, not anymore. Today it stands alongside North Korea, Mali and Russia, isolated, and the world no longer listens to it." They added the hashtag America Alone. In response, US diplomats walked out as their French counterparts were speaking at a later UN Security Council meeting on Ukraine. We've highlighted the empty seats where they'd normally be sitting. When he returned, the US Deputy UN Ambassador had this to say about their longtime ally.
We have stood by this member state through every conflict in which their freedoms have been imperiled. And today, I remind them that it is the United States that remains the beacon of liberty for the world. As such, we will not be affording them the benefit of listening to their politicized drivel until they renounce their condescending and disrespectful rhetoric and behave in a manner commensurate with their seat on this council.
Well, France was involved in a separate diplomatic incident today. Closer to home, a French warship fired shots behind a British MP while he did an interview on a boat in the Channel. Chris Philp, the Conservative Shadow Home Secretary, posted video of the incident online.
Anyone who did cross the Channel and arrive in Dover could be immediately deported within around about a week.
Give that a second, he's just dragging a line by the look of it.
Is that a warning shot towards us? I don't know.
Well, here's what he said to us about it afterwards.
No warnings were given at any point. There was no live firing warning in place. There were no warnings given over the radio. There were no signs displayed. So the way it made me feel is that this was an attempt at intimidation because they only shot when they were very at the closest point of approach to us. And then the French warship disappeared off.
Well, the French embassy gave their side of it via statement. Today, the French Coast Guard vessel Flamand conducted a small arms firing exercise to maintain their high level of operational readiness in the current international context. French Navy units train regularly. Individual combatant training is a normal activity for a vessel on operations. The statutory signals required by international standards for this type of firing exercise were displayed and all safety protocols were followed. This exercise is unrelated to the presence of a British ship in the area, which was outside the range of the firing. Well, that's it from me and the team. We'll be back again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Barbara is here with us next for The Wrap. Good night.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?